All right, let's talk about temperature adjustments. I tweeted just moments before I came on here. I tweeted an article written by some people who seem to be very knowledgeable. It's Berkeley Earth is the organization, and the author of the article was personally involved with climate change, temperature management stuff. And so one of the questions you often hear from the skeptics about climate change is that the history of temperature has been adjusted. And those adjustments tend to be all in the direction that makes it look like it's getting warmer at a higher rate. And why is it that the adjustments are never in the other direction? Ask the skeptics. Now, I don't know, first of all, that they're always in one direction. That's what the skeptics claim. That's not my claim. So I thought, well, this would be interesting to see a scientist actually explain their side. You know, somebody who's pro-climate change in the sense that they're with the majority, and they actually have worked in the field, what would they say to defend about all these adjustments? So here's the first thing you need to know about temperature adjustments. There have been a lot of them, right? So it's not a few temperatures here or there, not just a few stations. It's a main theme of the temperature history is adjustments. So adjustments are normal, common, a lot of it is happening. So it's not a minor point. So if the adjustments are wrong, then all of climate change predictions are wrong. If the adjustments are accurate, meaning that their estimates come in pretty close to reality, then it's very important because it would indicate that the Earth is warming at a higher rate according to the majority of scientists. And so we should know that, right? So I dig into this article, and you should too, by the way. It's one of the most illuminating things you'll ever see on the topic. And I tweeted it, so you can find it in my Twitter feed. And I just tweeted it, so it'll be toward the top. So what they talk about is the reasons for why they have to make estimates. And some of the reasons are this. In some cases, they moved measuring devices. And it turns out in a lot of cases, there are quite a few cases where they had the measuring instrument in one place, but for various reasons they had to move it to some other place. And then they had to do a manual adjustment to correct for the fact that the location was different. They also changed the devices. So the type of measuring device, you know, there's the old type and the modern type, you know, in just simplifying this. And there are cases where the old one was replaced with the new one, and then again, they had to make some adjustments to correct for that. And then, of course, there are, you know, the concrete urban island effect, right? The fact that if your measuring device is somewhere in the woods, and then over time a city is built around you, this is the oversimplified version, then the heat from the city itself and the concrete would influence your measurements. So even though the world didn't necessarily get warmer, except on that little island, it might overrepresent the warming. So you have all these good reasons why the past data had to be adjusted. If you dig into what method they used to adjust it, and you start reading, like, you know, how they've done it, it's a judgment. That's it. So you probably thought that the climate temperature data that everyone is using, the skeptics are using it, the climate scientists are using it, you probably thought that's a pretty close estimate of what the actual temperature was. But once you learn how it was done, it's completely unreliable. And keep in mind, here's the important point. I'm reading a pro-climate change opinion of why the estimates are reasonable estimates. And when I'm reading that, it is so not persuasive that these are good estimates. If you've lived in the real world and you read how they actually make these estimates, you cannot believe that these are real numbers anymore. And again, I'm not reading the skeptics. I'm reading the climate scientists themselves, or somebody who was involved in it. Hold on a second. And it completely changed my opinion of these adjustments. Because if you've lived in the real world and you've ever adjusted numbers, as I have, I've done lots of financial projections in my prior careers. And if you're estimating temperature, you're not doing science. They've created because estimates are allowed in the data corrections, the fact that they're allowed at all, and it's very complicated, and there's lots of personal incentive to get a certain answer. The credibility of the temperature data, it's close to zero. I actually thought before I read this article defending the data, I thought probably it was pretty good. But when you read it, it's like, oh my God. You have to read it yourself. I'm not going to describe it. Just read it yourself. And if you're over, I'm going to make a prediction. If you're under 30 and you don't have much real world, let's say business experience, you might read this article and say, that seems reasonable. Scientists made estimates. They probably make estimates all the time. They know what they did. It's peer reviewed. It's probably pretty good. If you're over 30, and the more over 30, the better, and you have experience with big companies and how numbers are estimated and how people make projections and how the human brain works and how big organizations work. If you have that level of experience and you read this article about how temperature is estimated in the past, you will not believe in climate science anymore. I don't believe anybody with real world experience can read how this is done and would believe that it is even a little bit credible. Now, this is a big problem because, as I've said before, I'm still on the fence about a firm opinion about climate change. I think I agree with the vast majority of both skeptics and scientists and the fact that the world is probably getting warmer. I think they can figure that out. There must be enough different sources that they can figure that out. And that CO2 has a role. I just don't know how big it is.